I'm Corey, 34, and I have one rule in life. If I promise something to my son, I will move heaven and earth to make it happen. That rule is what pushed me through 3 months of overtime shifts, skipped lunches, and evenings coming home smelling like burnt coffee from my job at the repair shop. It was all worth it, though, because last Saturday, I finally walked through the door holding a hard case with the acoustic guitar my 12-year-old, Mason, had been talking about nonstop for almost a year. This wasn't just any guitar. It was a $2,000 Taylor, the kind of instrument you save up for, the kind of thing a kid remembers for the rest of his life. Mason's face when I opened the case made every late night worth it. He just stood there, hands frozen, like he was afraid touching it would make it disappear. Then he reached out, strummed a single chord, and looked at me like I'd just given him superpowers. That first evening, we sat together in the living room while he played simple riffs he'd learned online, his fingers still clumsy, but his grin wide enough to hurt. He was so proud he asked me if we could take the guitar to Grandma and Grandpa's on Sunday, because they should hear this. I hesitated. My side of the family is complicated. My parents have a habit of dismissing anything I do, and my older brother, Derek, has somehow turned being a dad into his entire personality. He and his wife treat their 9-year-old twins like royalty, and if you dare outshine them, even by accident, they make sure you regret it. Still, I figured maybe, just maybe, showing Mason's accomplishment would get him a little encouragement from the family. And honestly, Mason was so excited I didn't have the heart to say no. Sunday afternoon, we loaded the guitar into the car like it was made of glass. The whole drive there, Mason kept running his fingers over the case, whispering about the song he was going to play. When we got to my parents' house, the usual chaos was in full swing. Derek's twins were running around the backyard with plastic bats, my dad was filming them on his phone, and my mom was yelling from the porch about not hitting each other in the face. "Hey, everyone," I said as we walked in. "Mason's got something to show you." Derek looked up from his lawn chair and smirked. "Oh boy, what is it this time? Another science fair project?" "It's his guitar," I said, keeping my voice even. "He's been learning, and he wanted to play for you guys." My dad barely glanced at us before going back to filming the twins. My mom sighed like I'd just announced we were about to read the dictionary out loud. "Well, set it up then, I guess." We went inside, so Mason could tune up in the relative quiet of the living room. As soon as he started playing, the mood shifted. My parents sat stiffly, Derek leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, and even the twins stopped running around and stared for a minute. Mason's playing wasn't perfect, but you could hear the hours of practice behind every note. When he finished, I waited for someone, anyone, to say something nice. "Cute," my mom said finally, her tone flat. "But don't get him too excited, Corey. Kids quit hobbies all the time. You'll regret throwing money at this when he drops it next month." Mason's face fell, but before I could say anything, Derek chimed in. $2,000 for a guitar? That's insane. You know you can get one at Walmart for like $80, right?" "It's not the same," I said, trying to stay calm. "This is a quality instrument. It'll last him years." "Yeah," Derek said with a laugh, "if the twins don't get to it first." I didn't like the way he said that. He had that grin, the one that always meant he was about to do something obnoxious just to get a rise out of me. I picked up the guitar case and put it back by the couch, partly to keep it safe, partly because I suddenly didn't trust leaving it out. The rest of the afternoon was tense. Every time Mason tried to talk about his guitar, my mom changed the subject. Derek made a joke about me, trying to raise a rock star. Even the twins seemed to sense the weird energy. They kept glancing at the case like it was some kind of forbidden treasure. By the time we were getting ready to leave, I was exhausted. Mason, though, still had that spark in his eyes. He wanted to play one more song outside before we left. I hesitated but finally agreed. We stepped onto the patio, Mason carefully holding the guitar, and that's when it happened. The first real hint that the day was about to go sideways. One of Derek's twins grabbed a plastic bat and swung it through the air, stopping just inches from the guitar's body. Mason froze. My heart jumped into my throat. "Knock it off," I snapped. But Derek just laughed from the porch. "Relax, Corey. They're just playing." Something about his tone told me this wasn't over. And I was right. What happened next would make every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I wish I could say I overreacted, that the whole bat swing inches from the guitar thing was just a fluke, but it wasn't. That little moment was the spark that lit the powder keg. I could feel it, like the air was charged. Mason's knuckles tightened on the neck of the guitar, and he looked up at me, wide-eyed, silently asking if he should put it back in the case. I almost told him yes, almost told him we were leaving right then and there. But a part of me hated the idea of Derek and his family thinking they could scare us into backing down. "Go ahead, bud," I said quietly. "Play your song." Mason nodded and started to strum. The sound floated across the patio, clear and warm, but before he could even get through the first verse, the twins started shouting over him. Not talking, full-on screaming at each other like they were competing with the guitar for volume. Then one of them picked up a wiffle ball and threw it at Mason's feet, making him stumble back a step. "Hey," I barked, my patience already fraying. Derek, still lounging on the porch steps with a beer in his hand, barely glanced over. "They're just playing, man. Chill out." "They're aiming at him while he's holding an instrument that cost me $2,000, I said sharply. "It's not a toy. Can you get them to stop?" Derek smirked. "They're kids, Corey. Lighten up. If the thing's that fragile, maybe you shouldn't bring it around." That stung, partly because of how casual he sounded. He knew how hard I'd worked for that guitar. I'd told him about the overtime shifts just a few weeks earlier when we grabbed lunch. He'd rolled his eyes back then, too, saying something about how he'd never waste that kind of money on a kid's hobby. Mason's song fizzled out. He stood there quietly, looking like he wanted to disappear, and that was what really got me. My son isn't the kind of kid to demand the spotlight, so for him to work up the courage to play in front of the family, only to get laughed over and interrupted, it felt cruel. "Come on, let's pack up," I said finally. But Mason didn't move. "Dad," he whispered, "can I just finish it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, go ahead." This time, he tried again, but he didn't get halfway through before my mom called from the kitchen window. "Corey, don't let him hog everyone's attention. The twins want to do their skit." Their skit. The thing they force everyone to watch at every family gathering. Usually some combination of TikTok dances and half-remembered movie quotes that we all have to clap for like it's Broadway. "He's almost done." I called back. "Well, hurry it up," she said, like we were somehow inconveniencing them by existing. Mason's shoulders drooped. I could see him debating whether to keep going or just give up. He played the last few chords faster than usual and quietly put the guitar back in its case. I knelt next to him. "Hey, you were great." But he didn't answer, just nodded and sat down on the patio steps while Derek gathered everyone around for the twins' big performance. The skit went on for 10 minutes, during which Derek made sure to film every second on his phone, cheering loudly and occasionally glancing at me with that smug grin, like he was daring me to say something. When it ended, my parents clapped and hooped like they'd just witnessed an Oscar-winning performance. "See, Corey," my dad said. "This is the kind of thing we love to see. The kids having fun together." I bit back a sarcastic reply. "Fun together. Right." We were about to head out when my mom suddenly said, "Oh, leave the guitar here. The twins might like to try it." My head snapped around. "Absolutely not." She frowned. "Why not? Sharing teaches kids to be generous." "It's not a toy," I said firmly. "And Mason's still learning to take care of it. He just got it yesterday." Derek chuckled under his breath. "Relax, dude. They're not going to break it. Let them hold it for a minute." Not happening. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Instead, my mom muttered something about me being overly dramatic, and Derek smirked like I'd just given him a new way to get under my skin. We left soon after, but the tension didn't end there. Over the next week, I got 3 separate texts from Derek with funny memes about helicopter parents. One of them showed a kid in bubble wrap holding a guitar. Another was a photo of a broken guitar with the caption, "Relax, it's just wood." I ignored them, hoping he'd get bored, but by the following weekend, he was still at it. This time, he called me while I was working on a carburetor and said, "Hey, we're having everyone over on Sunday. Bring Mason and his precious baby guitar. Maybe we can finally teach him how to loosen up." Something in his voice told me it wasn't just a joke. There was a challenge in it, like he was daring me to show up. "Yeah, we'll be there," I said after a pause. I wasn't going to let him think he'd scared us off. Mason was excited again, but I noticed he was quieter than usual when he packed up the guitar that morning. When I asked if he was nervous, he just shrugged. When we got there, the vibe was off from the start. My parents were already outside with lawn chairs set up, and Derek had that grin on his face, the one that made my stomach tighten. The twins were standing by the shed with their plastic bats again, whispering to each other and giggling. "Look who finally made it," Derek said as we walked up. "You ready for a real concert?" I didn't answer, just took the case inside and had Mason tune up in the kitchen. This time, when he stepped out to play, the twins were already on the grass, pretending to be baseball players, taking big practice swings with their bats. My dad actually started filming again, pointing his phone at the twins and chuckling. "Look at these two. Future sluggers." Mason hesitated, glancing at me nervously. "It's okay," I told him, even though every instinct I had was screaming that it wasn't. He started to play. The twins crept closer. Derek didn't stop them. My mom didn't stop them. And then, just as Mason hit the chorus, one of them swung his bat again, not at the air this time, but at the guitar. The sound it made, the hollow crack of the bat hitting the wood, echoed through the yard. And that was the moment everything changed. I froze. Mason gasped and stumbled back, clutching the neck of the guitar, but the damage was already done, a long, ugly dent carved into the wood. My parents burst out laughing. Derek actually doubled over, holding his stomach. "Oh man," he said between wheezes. "You should have seen your face." I could feel something inside me snap. And that's when my sister walked out onto the patio, looked at the guitar, and smirked. "Guess he'll learn about real life now." I looked at Mason. His eyes were shining with tears, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. What I did next made everyone go silent. For a few long seconds, no one said anything. The yard was silent except for Mason's shaky breathing and the faint hum of the cicadas. I crouched down and took the guitar from him as gently as I could, running my hand over the fresh dent in the wood. It wasn't just a scratch. It had cracked the finish and left a deep mark. I knew right away this was going to cost a lot to repair, and even then, it would never look the same. "All right," I said quietly, standing up. My voice was calm, too calm. "We're done here." I turned to go, but Derek stepped in front of me, grinning like this was all still a joke. "Whoa, come on, man. Don't be such a buzzkill. It's just a guitar." "It's not just a guitar," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It's Mason's guitar, and you just let your kids use it for batting practice." He shrugged. "Accidents happen." "That wasn't an accident." Derek's grin widened. "What? You think I told them to hit it? Maybe if you didn't baby him so much, he'd toughen up a little." I stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. My mom chimed in from her lawn chair. "Corey, you really are overreacting. It's a good lesson for him. The world doesn't bend over backwards for your kid." Mason's lip trembled, and he looked at me like he was waiting for me to defend him. That was the moment the emotional weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just about a guitar. This was about respect. About the way my family had been treating me and my son for years. "I'm taking him home," I said, pushing past Derek. But then Derek said something that made me stop in my tracks. "Fine, take your kid home. But the guitar stays." I froze. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," he said, stepping closer, that smug look plastered on his face. "You brought it here. The twins want to play with it. Leave it." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're insane if you think I'm leaving this here after what just happened. You're not taking it anywhere," Derek said, suddenly serious. He reached out and put his hand on the case. "You think you're better than everyone, buying your kid a fancy guitar like you're some kind of hero. Maybe it's time you learn to share." I pulled the case closer to me. "Let go." "Or what?" he said, smirking. "You gonna hit me?" That was the moment I saw it, the phone in my dad's hand. He wasn't just filming the twins anymore. He had the camera pointed at us, recording. And then I realized he'd been filming this whole time. Mason crying, the bat hitting the guitar, Derek taunting me. "You're recording this?" I said, my voice low. My dad didn't even blink. "Of course. This is good stuff. Maybe we'll send it to America's funniest home videos. Get a laugh out of it." That hit me harder than Derek's words. My own father, watching his grandson cry, thought this was entertainment. "You think this is funny?" I said. He shrugged. "You're the one making it dramatic." Mason looked up at me, his face pale. "Dad, can we please just go?" I gripped the case so tightly my knuckles turned white. "We're leaving," I said again. But Derek wasn't done. "Not until you apologize," he said, stepping right into my space. "Apologize?" I repeated, incredulous. "For overreacting," he said with a smirk. "For storming around like some big shot. You scared the kids." I looked over at the twins. They weren't scared. They were laughing, whispering to each other like this was the best entertainment they'd had all summer. No, I said flatly. Derek raised his eyebrows. No. I turned to Mason. Get in the car. He hesitated for a split second before hurrying toward the driveway. Derek made a move like he was going to block me again, but this time I didn't stop. I walked right past him, shouldered open the gate, and headed for the car. That should have been the end of it, but as I was loading the guitar into the trunk, I heard Derek's voice behind me. You know what? He said loudly enough for the whole yard to hear. Maybe we should just keep it until you can pay us back for the damage. I froze. Excuse me. You heard me, he said. Your kid dented it with his own carelessness. My twins shouldn't have to take the blame. So either leave it here, or I'll tell Mom and Dad to make sure you don't get invited back until you pay for it. I stared at him, stunned. He was actually trying to flip the blame on Mason. That's not how this works, I said slowly. Sure it is, Derek said, smirking. You think you're always right, but this is our house, our rules. You want to come here, you follow them. Otherwise, stay gone. I looked at my parents, expecting at least one of them to say something, to tell Derek he was going too far. But they just sat there, silent, like they agreed with him. My mom even nodded once, as if to say, he's right. That was the breaking point for me. All the times they had dismissed me, all the ways they'd favored Derek over me, all the snide comments about Mason, it all came crashing down at once. Fine, I said finally, my voice like ice. We're gone. And then I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Derek pick up his phone and start filming again, laughing like this was the best joke of his life. That image burned into my mind. I didn't just feel hurt anymore. I felt betrayed. Not just by Derek, but by my entire family. They had made it clear where we stood, and for the first time, I believed them. That night, Mason didn't come out of his room for hours. When he finally did, he asked me if he'd done something wrong. I knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, no, you did everything right. They were the ones who were wrong. But inside, I was already thinking, plotting, because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. And the very next morning, I got a message from Derek that nearly made my blood boil. It was a video, the one my dad had filmed, posted online, with the caption, "When your brother thinks his kid is a rock star." The comments were full of laughing emojis. And that was when I decided I was done playing nice. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over in my head, like a movie I couldn't turn off. The sound of the bat hitting the guitar, Derek's smug grin, my parents laughing, my sister's cruel little smirk. It all looped in my mind until the anger stopped burning hot and turned into something heavier, colder. The video was what really broke me. I watched it once, just once, because I had to see what Mason had seen. The clip was 30 seconds long, just enough to catch the bat swinging into the guitar, Mason gasping, me stepping forward, and then you could hear my dad laughing so hard he wheezed. Derek had added some ridiculous sound effect over the impact, like a cartoon bonk, and slowed it down for comic effect. Mason's face was clearly visible in the frame, his eyes wide, about to cry, and my family thought that was funny enough to share. I felt sick. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I just sat there, scrolling through the comments. People who didn't even know us were laughing, making jokes about spoiled kids and expensive toys, saying things like, "Bet the dad cried more than the kid." I hated that they were half right. I did feel like crying. Not because of the guitar, but because of what this meant for Mason. When I checked on him the next morning, he was sitting at his desk staring at the wall, the guitar case unopened beside him. "Want to play a little before school?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "You sure? It might make you feel better." He didn't even look at me. What's the point? They'll just laugh again. That hit me harder than anything Derek had said. Mason had never been a loud, outgoing kid, but he'd always had this spark, a quiet confidence when he was doing something he loved. And now, because of one afternoon and one stupid video, that spark was gone. The next few days were the longest of my life. I kept getting notifications because Derek had tagged me in the video, like he wanted me to see how many people were laughing. My parents didn't reach out once, not to check on Mason, not to apologize, not even to pretend to care. My sister sent me a single text. "You really embarrassed yourself. Maybe try being less sensitive next time." I didn't reply. At work, I was distracted. I'd go through the motions of fixing a carburetor or changing oil, but my head wasn't there. Every time I looked down at my hands, I saw them holding that cracked guitar case. Every time I heard laughter in the shop, I heard my parents' voices overlapping with Derek's. The worst part was the guilt. I kept asking myself if I'd made a mistake bringing Mason over in the first place. I knew how my family was, knew how they treated me, and yet I had still thought, foolishly, that this time would be different, that they would see Mason's hard work and support him. One night, Mason came out of his room and sat down at the kitchen table. "Dad," he said quietly. "Yeah. Can we sell the guitar?" I stared at him, stunned. "Why would we do that?" "Because I don't want it anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I look at it, I think about what happened. I think about them laughing." I felt my throat tighten. "Mason, this guitar is yours. You worked hard for it. You practiced for months. You love music." "Not anymore," he said. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen staring at the case for a long time. I couldn't sell it. I couldn't just erase what we'd been through. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that Mason was hurting, not just because of the dent, but because of what it represented. I realized then that I couldn't fix this the way I'd fixed everything else, by shrugging it off, by pretending it didn't bother me. That's what I'd done my whole life with my family. Every time Derek mocked me, every time my parents dismissed me, every time they favored him over me, I swallowed it. And all that had done was teach them that they could keep doing it. This was different. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my son. For the next week, I kept my head down. I didn't respond to Derek's texts, even though he sent more of them. Photos of the twins holding plastic bats, captions like, "Ready for round 2." He thought he'd gotten to me, and maybe he had, but not in the way he expected. I started making calls. At first, it was just about getting the guitar repaired. I contacted the music store where I bought it, asked about the cost of refinishing and fixing the dent. They told me it would be pricey, but it could be done. I almost scheduled the repair right then, but something stopped me. What was the point of fixing the guitar if Mason wasn't going to touch it again? That's when the planning started, quietly, slowly, piece by piece. I didn't tell Mason at first. He needed time to process what had happened, and I didn't want him to feel like I was pushing him to get over it. Instead, I focused on gathering information. I asked a friend who was a lawyer about whether posting videos of someone's child without consent could be taken down. I started saving screenshots of the comments under Derek's video, documenting everything. At night, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, digging through old memories, not just recent ones, but years back. Times my parents had undermined me, times Derek had taken things from me, times they'd made me feel small in front of Mason. I wrote them all down, one by one, until I had pages of incidents staring back at me. It wasn't about revenge yet, not exactly. At this stage, it was about clarity, about finally seeing my family for who they were instead of who I wished they could be. And as the list grew longer, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for them to apologize. I stopped hoping they would call. And I stopped feeling guilty for wanting to protect my son. By the end of the second week, I knew what I had to do. I didn't tell Mason, not yet, but I started making plans for the next family gathering. Derek's birthday party was coming up, and I knew everyone would be there. If they wanted to put on a show, fine. I'd give them a show they wouldn't forget. Because they had taken something from Mason, not just a guitar, but his sense of safety, his joy, and I wasn't about to let that stand. But before I could act, something happened that pushed me over the edge. A new video popped up on Derek's page. This time, it wasn't just the bat hitting the guitar. It was edited together with clips of Mason tuning it, clips of him playing in the living room the first time, even clips from months ago when we'd been over and he'd been practicing quietly in the corner. And over the entire thing, Derek had added mocking commentary, laughing and saying things like, "Rockstar in training, somebody get this kid a record deal." He'd been recording Mason for months without me knowing. That was the final straw. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt ready. And as I closed my laptop that night, a plan started to form. One that would make sure my family finally understood that this time, they'd gone too far. The morning after I saw that second video, something in me clicked. It was like I had been standing in a dark room for years, and someone finally turned the lights on. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. That cold, heavy feeling in my chest turned into determination. I started with Mason. We sat at the kitchen table over breakfast, and I told him, "I'm getting that video taken down." His head snapped up. "You can do that." "Maybe not right away," I said. "But I promise you." We're not letting them turn you into a joke." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will we have to see them again?" That was the first time I said it out loud. "Not unless we want to." Something about those words seemed to ease the tension in his shoulders. He still didn't open the guitar case that day, but for the first time since that awful weekend, he sat with me on the couch and watched a video of one of his favorite guitarists. Baby steps, I told myself. Meanwhile, I started putting pieces in place. I called my friend Lyle, who works in IT security and has a very low tolerance for bullies. When I told him about Derek posting videos of Mason without my consent, he didn't even hesitate. "Send me the links," he said. 2 days later, the videos were gone. Poof. Removed from the platform for privacy violations. Derek, of course, blew up my phone that night. "What did you do?" his first text read. Then, "Do you have any idea how many views that video had?" Then, 30 seconds later, "You're pathetic. Can't take a joke." I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshotted every single one of those messages and added them to the growing folder I'd started. That was step 1, get control of the narrative. Step 2 was about Mason. I took the guitar to the music store for the repair estimate, and while I was there, I talked to the owner, a guy named Paul, who has been running the shop for decades and has seen just about everything. When I told him what had happened, he shook his head. "That's a shame," he said. "But you know what? Kids bounce back. You just have to give them the right push." He showed me a small soundproof practice room in the back of the store and told me they had private instructors who could work with Mason one-on-one. "Sometimes it helps when the kid sees someone other than dad cheering them on," he said with a wink. I signed Mason up for weekly lessons before I even left the store. When I told Mason later that night, his eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Private lessons? For real?" "For real," I said. "And I'll be right there the first time, just in case you want backup." That Saturday, we went to his first lesson. Mason was nervous at first. He kept glancing around like someone might be laughing at him. But his instructor, a college kid named Caleb, was patient and encouraging. By the end of the hour, Mason was smiling again. On the way home, he said, "Maybe we don't have to sell the guitar yet." I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost had to pull over. While Mason slowly got his confidence back, I focused on step 3, getting my own life in order. I'd been at the repair shop for years, doing steady work, but I'd never really thought about moving up. Now, I found myself staying late not just out of obligation, but because I wanted to, cleaning up the shop floor, streamlining the inventory system, even talking to the owner about ways to bring in more customers. He noticed. A few weeks later, he called me into his office. "You've been stepping up lately," he said. "I like what I'm seeing. How would you feel about taking on a management role?" I nearly fell out of my chair. "Me? You? It's a pay bump and a lot more responsibility, but I think you're ready." I accepted on the spot. The extra money meant I could pay for Mason's lessons without worrying, and I started putting a little aside every paycheck into a future fund, not just for repairs or emergencies, but for something bigger, something that would set us up in a way my family could never take away from us. I also started getting into shape, not in a new year, new me way, just quietly, gradually, so that every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone a little stronger, a little more grounded. I bought a cheap weight bench for the garage, started going for runs after work, even cut back on the takeout. Mason joined me sometimes, riding his bike alongside me in the evenings, and we'd talk about music, school, life. We were building something new, just the two of us. And the more I focused on us, the less I cared about what Derek and my parents were doing, or at least, that's what I told myself. But I won't lie. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Derek, every time a family group chat popped up with some picture of the twins, I felt that same cold anger stir again. Then came the invitation. Derek's birthday barbecue. My mom wrote in the group chat. "Sunday at 3. Everyone's coming. Bring Mason. The twins miss him." I almost ignored it. Almost. But then I saw Derek's reply under it. "Better tell Corey to leave the baby guitar at home this time," faced with tears of joy. I stared at that message for a long time. And then I typed a single reply. "We'll be there." Mason looked surprised when I told him. "Do we have to?" "Yes," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. "We do. Trust me." Because by then, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had a plan, one that would make sure Derek, my parents, my sister, and everyone else there finally understood that the days of laughing at us were over. And when that Sunday came, I was ready. ready in a way I hadn't been before. Because this time, I wasn't walking into their house as the guy they could push around. This time, I was walking in with leverage. And I knew exactly how to use it. But first, I had to let them show their true colors. One last time. So when I made my move, no one could pretend they didn't deserve what was coming. And as soon as we walked into that backyard, I could already see the setup, the camera phones, the smirks, the twins clutching their bats like props. They thought they were about to humiliate us again. They had no idea they were about to hand me everything I needed. Walking into Derek's backyard that Sunday felt like stepping onto a stage. The smell of barbecue hung in the air, kids were running around barefoot in the grass, and the adults were clustered near the patio, drinks in hand, waiting for the entertainment to begin. I could tell right away that we were the entertainment. Derek spotted us first. Well, he said, spreading his arms like a game show host welcoming a contestant. Look who decided to show up. I just smiled and nodded. Wouldn't miss it. Mason stayed close to me, clutching his backpack strap. He wasn't scared exactly. He'd been getting his confidence back in lessons, but he wasn't taking any chances either. I had told him before we left, you don't have to play. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Just watch. This is for us. And it was. As the afternoon went on, I watched everything. Every smirk, every joke, every glance exchanged between Derek and my parents. It was like they couldn't help themselves. The twins came over more than once pretending to swing invisible bats, and Derek filmed them, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. Careful, I said casually the third time they did it. You don't want to break anything important. That earned me a chuckle from Derek. Relax, Corey. We're not touching anything you care about today. I smiled, but inside, my plan was solidifying. I wasn't going to just get even. I was going to make sure they understood what they had done and why it wasn't going to happen again. The first piece of information fell into my lap almost by accident. While I was standing near the grill getting a soda, I overheard Derek talking to my dad. So I finally got the promotion, Derek was saying, his voice dripping with pride. New supervisor position starts Monday. I'll be running the whole department. My dad clapped him on the back. That's my boy. See, hard work pays off. I froze. Derek had just gotten a new job, and not just any job, but one at a company I happened to know something about. The owner of that company, believe it or not, was a regular customer at the repair shop. He brought his classic cars in twice a year for tune-ups, and I'd been the one working on them for the past 3 years. We'd talked plenty, and he knew me by name. I felt my mind start to spin. It wasn't that I wanted Derek to lose his job, not exactly. But the idea that I had a direct line to someone who now held Derek's professional future in his hands was interesting. Very interesting. I didn't say anything in the moment. I just filed it away, letting the knowledge settle like a weight in my pocket. Later, while everyone was eating, my mom tried to bait me. So, Corey, she said, did you ever fix that fancy guitar? Or are you still crying about it? The table chuckled. I set my fork down slowly. It's getting repaired, I said calmly. And Mason's been taking lessons. He's getting really good. Lessons? Derek snorted. What, private ones? How much is that setting you back? Don't worry about it, I said with a small smile. I can afford it. That was another thing that had changed since I'd taken the management position. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just scraping by, I was comfortable. I'd paid off the last of my credit card debt, set up a savings account for Mason, even started putting money toward a down payment on a bigger place for us. I could see the way Derek's expression shifted when I said it. Just a flicker, irritation, maybe even envy, before he laughed it off. Good for you, man. Guess somebody's finally getting their life together. I didn't take the bait. I just smiled. Because I wasn't here to trade insults. I was here to gather ammo. The second big opportunity came when my sister, who had been scrolling on her phone all afternoon, leaned over and whispered to me. You know they still have the video, right? I turned to her. What video? She smirked. The original. Dad saved it before it got taken down. He says he's going to show it at Christmas. Says it'll be a tradition. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. Interesting. That night, after the barbecue, I went home and wrote everything down. Derek's promotion, the saved video, the comments my mom had made, everything. It was becoming clear that my family didn't just think what happened was funny. They thought it was a permanent joke, something they could pull out and laugh about for years to come. I wasn't going to let that happen. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept building momentum. I went above and beyond at work, impressing the owner enough that he offered me a spot shadowing him on the business side of things, learning about bookkeeping, supply chain, customer management. He said he was thinking about retiring in a few years and needed someone who could eventually take over. That's when it hit me. I was on track to own the shop one day. And if that happened, my financial situation would change completely. That thought fueled me. I doubled down on Mason's lessons too, surprising him one Friday with a brand new hardshell case to replace the one that had been damaged. When he opened it, he ran his fingers over the smooth lining and whispered, "This is way nicer than the old one." "You deserve it," I said. "And when your guitar comes back from repair, you're going to keep it safe. No one touches it unless you say so." Mason smiled, a real, wide smile, for the first time since the incident. "Can I play at the winter recital?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what they'd tried to take from us. Still, revenge was coming. Because when Derek texted me a week later saying, "Family dinner at Mom's next weekend. Don't be late," I knew exactly what I was going to do. I spent the next few days preparing carefully, making sure I had everything lined up. I spoke with my lawyer friend again, this time about legal boundaries, what counted as harassment, what counted as defamation, what my options were if the video was played again publicly. I even had him draft a formal letter. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to make it clear that any future attempts to distribute or display the video would have consequences. By the time Saturday rolled around, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because this dinner wasn't going to be another chance for them to laugh at us. It was going to be the moment the balance of power shifted permanently. And when we walked into my parents' house that evening, I could feel it in the air. They thought they still had the upper hand. They had no idea what was about to hit them. When Mason and I pulled into my parents' driveway that Saturday evening, I could already feel the tension humming under my skin, but it wasn't the same shaky, tight-chested feeling I'd had at the barbecue weeks ago. This was different. I was calm, collected, almost eerily so. My plan had been turning over in my head for days, refined with every mental rehearsal, and now it was time to put it into action. Inside, the house smelled like roast beef and garlic mashed potatoes, my mom's special family dinner menu. The kind she used to make when I was a kid, before she started letting Derek dictate how every family gathering went. Everyone was already there when we walked in. Derek, his wife, the twins sprawled on the living room floor playing with toy cars, my sister scrolling on her phone, and my parents seated like royalty at the dining table. "About time," Derek said with a grin. "We were starting to think you chickened out." "Not a chance," I said, setting Mason's backpack gently by the wall. I didn't raise my voice or make a scene. I just smiled. Dinner started off deceptively normal. My parents made small talk about the weather, my sister complained about gas prices, and Derek went on and on about his first 2 weeks in his new supervisor position. I nodded in all the right places, even asked him questions about his job, which seemed to inflate his ego even more. He had no idea I was baiting him, letting him get comfortable, letting him think I was back in my usual role as the quiet little brother who didn't rock the boat. And then, right before dessert, my dad said, "Hey, speaking of funny stuff," and started reaching for his phone. I knew what was coming. "Dad," I said lightly, "before you pull that up, I have something I want to share." Everyone turned to look at me. Derek smirked. "Oh boy, here we go." I stood, calm as ever, and pulled a folder out of Mason's backpack. Inside were neatly printed pages, the screenshots of Derek's texts, copies of the online comments, and the legal letter my lawyer friend had drafted. "I've been doing a little thinking," I said, laying the folder on the table, "and a little research. It turns out posting videos of someone's kid without consent and refusing to take them down when asked can actually get you in some serious trouble. Not just with the platform, but legally." My mom frowned. "Corey, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said, still calm. "I'm finishing it. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to delete every copy of that video you have. Right now. And you're going to agree, in writing, never to show it or share it again." Derek barked out a laugh. "Or what? You gonna sue us?" "If I have to," I said, sliding the letter toward him. "This is a formal notice. It's not a joke. The next step after this would be a cease and desist, followed by legal action. I have every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence I need. So the choice is yours." The room went quiet. For the first time since this whole mess started, Derek's grin faltered. My dad broke the silence first. Corey, don't be ridiculous. This is family. You wouldn't drag us into court over a joke. It stopped being a joke the moment my son stopped playing music in his own home because he was scared you'd laugh at him again, I said, my voice sharpening for the first time all night. You humiliated him. You humiliated me. And you enjoyed it. That ends today. Mason looked up at me, his eyes wide, but I saw the smallest smile tug at the corner of his mouth. Derek leaned back in his chair, trying to play it off. You're bluffing. I smiled faintly. Am I? Then I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, and scrolled to a conversation with the owner of the company Derek now worked for. A friendly exchange, ending with, if you ever need anything, Corey, don't hesitate to reach out. I tilted the screen so Derek could see. Your boss is a regular at my shop. Nice guy. Loves talking about his employees. I wonder what he'd think about a supervisor who spends his weekends mocking his own nephew online. That did it. Derek's face turned red, and for once, he had nothing to say. You wouldn't, he muttered. I don't want to, I said honestly. But I will if I have to. So make the right choice. My sister, of all people, broke the stalemate. Just delete the video. Derek, she said, rolling her eyes. This isn't worth it. My mom looked from me to Derek, clearly torn, but finally she sighed. Fine. Get rid of it. All of it. Derek hesitated another beat, then pulled out his phone and started tapping furiously. After a moment, he held it up. Happy now? Not yet, I said. Show me the trash folder. And the backups. He glared at me, but he did it. One by one, he deleted every copy until I was satisfied. When it was done, I tucked the folder back into Mason's bag. Good, I said simply. Now we can eat dessert. The table was silent for the rest of the meal. Derek sulked, my dad muttered something about taking things too far, and my mom kept shooting me disapproving looks, but they didn't say a word about the video again. When we got to the car afterward, Mason climbed into the passenger seat and let out a long breath. You were awesome, he said quietly. I smiled at him. I told you. No one laughs at you like that ever again. He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he asked, can we practice when we get home? Absolutely, I said. And as I drove away from my parents' house, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Derek standing on the porch, arms crossed, his jaw tight. He wasn't laughing anymore. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning, because I still had more cards to play. They thought tonight was about a video. But tonight was about so much more than that. Tonight was about showing them that I wasn't the little brother they could humiliate anymore, and that I was just getting started. Driving home that night, there was a strange quiet between Mason and me, not the tense kind, but the kind that comes after a storm passes and the air feels clearer. He was staring out the window, tapping his fingers against his thigh like he was playing a silent rhythm. I recognized the beat. It was one of the songs he used to practice before the incident. When we got home, he actually opened the guitar case without me prompting him. He didn't play for long, just a few simple chords, but it was enough to make my chest ache with relief. The spark was back, but as satisfying as that night had been, I knew we weren't done yet. I'd forced Derek to delete the videos, yes, but that wasn't the same as accountability. My family had spent months making Mason the punchline of their private joke, and if I left it at that, they'd eventually find a way to spin this back on us. Paint me as the dramatic one. Tell Mason he overreacted. So I decided to close this chapter once and for all. The next morning, I sent out a group text to everyone who had been at dinner. My parents, Derek, my sister, me. I think it's time we take a break from family gatherings. Mason and I won't be coming to birthdays or holidays for the foreseeable future. We need distance. The responses came in quickly. Mom. Corey, don't be ridiculous. Families fight. You don't just run away. Me. This isn't a fight. This is a boundary. And it's non-negotiable. Derek. Oh, give me a break. You think you won because you made me delete a dumb video. Me. No, Derek. I think I won because last night was the first time you didn't get the last laugh. After that, I muted the group chat. I didn't want their words poisoning Mason's healing any more than they already had. For the next month, I focused entirely on rebuilding our world. Mason practiced more and more, sometimes leaving his bedroom door open so I could hear the music filling the house. His teacher, Caleb, said he was advancing faster than most kids his age. Then came the recital. Mason was nervous, but he played beautifully, and when the audience clapped, I saw pride flash across his face. Not the forced smile he gave when my parents used to clap sarcastically for him, but a real, beaming grin that made him look like a different kid. After the show, we went out for ice cream, just the two of us. Think Grandma and Grandpa would have liked it? He asked hesitantly. Probably, I said honestly. But we don't need them to clap for you to know you did great. He smiled and nodded, clearly satisfied with that answer. Meanwhile, on the family side, the silence between us stretched longer. My mom tried a few times to guilt-trip me, sending photos of the twins at soccer games, messages like they missed their cousin. But I didn't reply. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from Derek. "You talked to my boss, didn't you?" He snapped the moment I answered. "Nope," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "Don't lie to me, Corey. He called me into his office this morning. Said he'd been made aware of some questionable behavior outside of work. Asked me if it was true. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" I let a small smile creep into my voice. Maybe he saw the video before it got taken down. Internet has a long memory. "You ruined my reputation," Derek hissed. "No," I said evenly. "You did that yourself. I just stopped letting you hide it." There was a long pause before he finally muttered, "You're a real piece of work, you know that?" "Maybe," I said, "but at least I can look my kid in the eye and know I protected him." And then I hung up. After that, the call stopped. The text slowed. Even my parents backed off. I think Derek must have realized that pushing me any further might actually cost him his shiny new job, and my parents, for all their denial, weren't willing to risk more public drama. Months passed. Mason got better and better at guitar. He even started writing his own little riffs, playing them for me in the living room after dinner. The music that had once been silenced was louder than ever in our house, and every chord felt like another brick being laid in the wall I was building between us and the toxicity we'd left behind. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Mason in the garage, guitar in hand, playing for the neighbor's kids. He looked up at me and grinned. "They asked me to teach them something," he said. I just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The confidence in his voice, the way his hands moved without hesitation, the laughter of the kids around him. And then I realized, this was the real revenge. Not the legal letter, not the confrontation at dinner, not even the quiet panic I knew I'd caused Derek when he thought his career might be at risk. The real revenge was that Mason had taken back his joy, that he was thriving, playing music again, turning something painful into something beautiful. That night, as I closed up the garage, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from Derek. "Derek, guess you got what you wanted." I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. No. I got what Mason deserved. And then I blocked his number. I went back inside, sat on the couch, and listened to Mason play. The house felt lighter than it had in months. As the last note rang out, I thought about all the times my family had laughed at us, all the times they thought they had the power. And I smiled, not the bitter, angry smile I'd worn for weeks after the incident, but a calm, satisfied one. Because they'd learned the truth the hard way. When you spend years turning someone into the punchline, you shouldn't be surprised when one day they decide to write the ending and make it a masterpiece.